Hello, my dears, and welcome to this episode of Moms Who Poll. My name is Andrea, and I am your most average mom who polls. This is the show where we talk about balancing motherhood, dance, fitness, flexibility, and of course, our love for pole and pole dancing. Today, I'm going to be talking with one of my good friends, Allie. You can find her on Instagram as Allie Rachel Poles. Allie is a pole dancer of many years, a pole instructor of many years, and a mother of two. She recently did a cross-Atlantic move with her family and is now set up shop as a fabulous pole instructor in the United Kingdom. I'm super excited to chat with her today as she was the original inspiration for Moms Who Pole. She and I had this great idea that we were going to do happy hours together to talk about things related to motherhood, health, fitness, and pole dancing. So let's get dancing, my friends. Here we go. Okay. All right. Hey, Allie, thank you so much for joining me today, all the way from the UK. Yeah?
Yes. Hi.
Hey. So when we knew each other in San Diego, you had already been polling for a number of years. You have polled in Boston as well. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, I found and fell in love with pole in Boston, and I think it was 2013. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was summer of 2013.
And you were already teaching when you had taught in Boston, and then in San Diego you taught as well.
Yes, yeah. I started teaching quite early in my pole career, possibly too early. It was fine, but on hindsight, I look back at my baby polar days. I'm like, oh, I was already teaching then. I think I started teaching in like 2015, maybe something like that. Yeah. So yeah, pretty early days.
So you certainly have a lot of experience teaching. And I know when I met you, you had just, or maybe like a couple months, had already had baby number one, right?
Yes. Yep. Scarlet.
Yes. And I remember we were doing I think it was fish flops in one of the
Yeah.
classes.
Yeah. After having a baby. It's a bit much.
I think that because that was our first introduction, and I feel like I remembered like a certain level of like very low key but very quiet kind of frustration, like why can't I do this?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Because
and
I
I
could do them before babies, definitely. And yeah, that's the whole coming back from pregnancy and birth situation that happens with pole dancers.
Yes, and I remember completely inserting myself like in your life, like, oh hi, I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice here. It gets better, and it's
It
like
was actually really helpful. Yeah, you and one other pole dancer who had also had a kid around, I think around the same time as you, both kind of gave me some just encouragement because I feel like there weren't that many. My oldest child is about to turn 5 in a week, and I just didn't know hardly any pole moms really at that time. It didn't feel as common as it is now.
yeah, I feel like people are a lot more forward with being a pregnant pole dancer or a mother pole dancer. Maybe the algorithms on social media have changed, so it's not completely shadow banned or whatever it
True.
is we're calling it now.
True.
Yeah.
Right, right, right. And
Um,
I think in the recent years, like the big names have become pregnant and had babies, like, Michelle Shimmy and, all these other people where I remember back in the day, the only person that I saw go through pregnancy and recovery was Ali Kamikaze, who I love. And I've met her once and she's amazing and she's my idol. And you should definitely follow her, Ali Kamikaze on Instagram. But she posted her whole journey, basically pregnancy, postpartum. You saw all the strength that she lost and was trying to regain afterwards. And she was like, I'm like, she did it. I can do it. Um, back with my first. But since then, I feel like, Sarah Scott, is that her name? But there's just so many pole dancers now who, the big ones have had their kids now. So it's sort of, we can follow them and see how they do it. But I don't think we had that 5 years ago or, longer ago.
I think it was much less common then. And I think also we weren't using social media in that way. I know that sounds weird. It sounds like we're talking about the 1900s, but
But 5 years ago, it was different. It was. It's true.
I think back 10 years ago when I had, my daughter and I was
Mm.
looking up, kind of like homeopathic things for, lactation and stuff like that. And then 5 years later with my son, I'm looking at the same thing and there's just like a so much more information than there was 5 years previously. It just shows how fast things evolve.
Totally.
But yeah, that's how we became friends.
Yeah.
And then we decided we were going to go out. And that was the original kind of inspiration for Moms Who Pole, because I remember we were sitting at the restaurant and you said to me, I wish there was like a happy hour or a place where, moms who pole dance can just go and hang out and talk about mom stuff as pole dancers.
Right. It's a unique niche, group, isn't it?
It's super niche. And it's not like we sit around talking about how long the umbilical cord was or anything like that. It's
No, it's very pole focused. It's really like pole from the mom perspective is more because we're all obsessed.
exactly. I remember we would sit and we'd talk, and the conversation might be somewhat halting until we start talking about pole. And then all of a sudden it flows and the mom stuff kind of pulls into that.
Right. Weaves its way in.
Right. Like we would, one of the things that I really admired about you was, well, and still admire about you is your capability to do these really long, flowy combos. And
Oh, thank you.
they just look so great and they're so innovative. And if I tried to do that, I would get so tired. So
We all have our strengths because I love all your base work and you do tons of stuff that I can never do. So, I just do what's easiest for me. And that is one of my biggest takeaways actually from motherhood is just do what works best and what's easiest, whether it's pole or the rest of it, but mostly pole.
I think that's one of the hardest things to kind of get into the habit of if you are a pole dancer, particularly if you're a competitive pole dancer or you're a pole dancer that's trying to build up your skill set for something, that then
Mm-hmm.
when you have a child, you think your time is limited before you have a baby. But you don't.
Wow.
Yeah.
What happens after? Yeah, it's hard. That's the hardest part for in terms of pole. Yes.
And then with that limited time, having to determine, well, what can I do? And you're right,
Mm-hmm.
it's playing to your strengths. And
Yeah.
if it's long combos or bendy stuff, like that's what you're going to have to do. But you have to kind of reframe your mind away from this idea of, oh, I can work on all the things.
Right.
Because,
Completely. You have to focus it because you definitely don't have time to do it all. You don't even have time to do what you want. So you have to just pick and choose, like cherry pick what are your favorite things to do, squeeze those into that 30-minute nap or that 45-minute nap or that hour, when the kids are at daycare or preschool or whatever it is. Um, yeah, you definitely, I feel like you have to just focus it and narrow it down.
yeah, exactly. Well, tell me a little bit about, because you were pregnant with your first child, and it was during your recovery from your first child that I met you. And
Mm-hmm.
then I don't know if you were back to the way you were previously. You looked amazing to me, so I figure you were fine.
Thanks. I don't know either, to be honest. But yeah, I got pregnant while I was teaching in San Diego. And I kept teaching until I was about 6 months along. But I toned it down and I taught lower level classes than I had been teaching because I've been teaching more advanced. So as my pregnancy progressed, I told the owner, she was really understanding, and she just said, like, what do you feel comfortable doing? What do you want to do? And so we decided I would teach I think it was level 1 spin and level 1 tricks or something like that. Um, and I mean, I loved it. However, I did injure myself, and I feel like that's one thing that maybe doesn't get talked about that much is the relaxin hormone that makes you able to give birth more easily, quote unquote, which obviously it ain't easy, but it's supposed to help. Um, that hormone, I think, sort of destabilized my joints. And I was doing a move that was previously easy and not something I would even think twice about. And I injured my rotator cuff. And it's been a permanent injury ever since. And so that is just something I always tell moms who are pregnant when they are pole dancing. I'm like, obviously listen to your body, take it easy, but keep in mind that you might feel like you can do something, but you just don't know how your joints are going to respond, basically. And mine wasn't happy with it. So, but it wasn't that bad. Overall, I can still do everything, but my shoulder pops now permanently. So,
Yeah, my right shoulder is the same way, although it has nothing to do with pole. It has everything to do from carrying both kids on my right hip. And my right
right.
shoulder, the shoulder will cock itself forward and internally rotate. And just over time, both my kids got heavy very quickly. They were good eaters.
Mm-hmm. Good.
They got real heavy real fast. I look at other
Mm-hmm.
people's babies and I'm like, oh, those babies are so cute. And especially with like, I'll say this to my daughter a lot. I'm like, do you think, I was like, how cute is that little baby? Do you think your brother was ever that little? And she goes, no, he was little and he got big really fast. Like he was never that size.
Right.
Like the
Mine came
3-month-old
out
size.
big.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my kids were big too, and they came out big. They're both over 8 pounds. So it's just
Wow.
like, yeah, they were not the tiny little things that you see. I think they were both too big for newborn clothes when they came out. So they had to wear like the 0 to 3 months or whatever the next, next phase is.
Both my kids came out they were both under 8 pounds. They were around 7 pounds. But then, especially my son, he went from like 7 pounds. And then all of a sudden, like a month later, he was like 14 pounds. He just
Well, they were feeding well. That's great.
is a good eater. He was like a little cannonball. We joked that we were going to nickname him Frank the Tank, but Gus Gus, like the little fat mouse
Oh,
from Cinderella, that was the nickname
yes,
that stuck.
yeah. Oh, that's cute.
So what happened with baby number two? So you were dancing again, feeling really good, doing all of your long flowy combos with Scarlett
Yep,
making
yep.
some cameos in the background of your videos.
Yes, she still does. Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of got back to it. I was really determined to get back to it after Scarlet, and I was careful in how I did it, and that I did tons of research, and I was following all these like pelvic floor PTs online, and I even did a consult with one, and I went to pelvic floor PT, and so I was doing a lot of stuff that was trying to help my abs, my transverse abdominis, and everything sort of come back. And I had some pelvic floor dysfunction that I went to the PT for. But my first initial coming back from Scarlet, my oldest, I just like reassessed where I was at with like an invert and a butterfly and leg hang and things like that. And then I just worked on the basics until I sort of got back to where I was. And it took some time for sure. And, I remember feeling like I went to do a fan cake and it felt like where my abs were was just like blank space. Like there was nothing there, nothing firing, like I feel nothing. So I like really remember that feeling, but I think my body was a little bit shocked after giving birth to my first. And then I kind of went back like fully to my pre baby level between kids, even though I knew I was going to have another one. I wanted to have another one quickly. And I actually had a pregnancy between my two kids that I miscarried. So that was sort of an emotional and a whole experience through it. It wasn't a super long pregnancy, but it was, emotionally a lot to go through. And my body did do some changes. And then I went back again after that. And then I got pregnant almost right away with my younger daughter, Kira. And that pregnancy, I pulled through it, but I think I was gentler on myself in that one because I'd proven to myself with the first, like I can do this and I can get back to where I was. So I wasn't so worried about, keeping up my strength to the level I had before. So I kind of just danced and took it easy through that pregnancy. And then, and I had a lot of back pain and things like that I was trying to be careful with. But after her, what I thought was really interesting was that my body sort of, it just felt like it had done this before. So it handled the recovery much better after my second pregnancy than my first. And it just felt like I kind of get back to things like at 6 weeks postpartum, I was, I danced. Like I have this video on my Instagram where I look back now and I'm like, I can't believe I did that 6 weeks postpartum. And I wasn't trying to push myself, but I was just trying to dance and see where I was at. And I was like doing pretty well, considering just having given birth. But I think the initial shock of the first birth, you know, was harder for my body than actually the second one was.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, our bodies are very resilient. Our bodies learn things quickly. And that's why we hear a lot when we're addressing dysfunction or whatever with like PTs or with the medical community, they talk about how the body likes to take the path of least resistance. And over time, that's what
Right.
can create those imbalances. But it can also be quite a strength that your body remembered, okay,
Right.
this is the recovery process. I wasn't pulling
Mm-hmm.
when I had my daughter. So I have no way of comparing my son to my daughter in terms of recovery. The only difference for me
Right.
was I could barely walk when I left the hospital after my daughter. And with my son, I was
Yep.
up. Yeah, I'm like,
Exactly. And you had to be because you had your daughter, right? Like,
right.
yeah, like, we have this video because I took a video when my older daughter met her sister, right? The day we brought home the baby. And my older daughter was only 19 months. I mean, she was a baby, basically herself. But I was like squatting and sitting on the floor and doing all this stuff in the video. There's no way I could also barely walk after my first, and after my second, I was like, look at me go. I look fine. And that was like 2 days after giving birth, So I do think the body gets a bit more used if you have an uncomplicated birth, which I mostly did. I think your body, yeah, just gets a bit more used to it, I guess, with each kid. I don't know. I've only had two, so I don't know what happens with three, four, any of that. But
I think some of it too is the mind being resilient. It's one of the most frustrating things, like you said, when you did the fan kick and you felt like there was empty space there because that mind body connection can be, severed a little bit when you have like a big expansion of your abdomen and now you're trying to teach it to tighten back up.
right.
But by the same token, your mind knows that your body is able to do these things and you're able to kind of coach your body through the process. Whereas not being able to do something
Yeah.
before, you think, am I ever going to be able to do this again? But
Mm-hmm.
the second time, the mind says, yes, you will do it again because you've done it before.
Totally. And that reminds me when you say that after my second, I was kind of like, okay, well, you know what? I love like dance is kind of, so for me, dance, like low flow style of dance, and then spin pole are my two favorite things with pole. And those are kind of like where my heart is with pole. And so after I had my daughter, my second daughter, I thought like, I'm just going to focus on dance. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't need to invert. Who needs to invert? What's the point? Like if I need to go upside down, I'll go from a Jasmine and drop down. And that was kind of where my head was at after I had my second. And that's all I was really doing. I wasn't trying to push myself the way I had after my first. But then I just sort of fell into another teaching job at Dollhouse. And then it was like, okay, well, we need someone to teach, these higher level tricks classes. And I was like, oh, okay, so I have to get myself back in shape to teach these classes. And I wasn't like all the way there at first when I started teaching, but I'm like, well, I better get there. So, then I started challenging myself and doing everything that I had done before and got back to maybe I was probably my best pole shape actually at that time, but I didn't even think I would do that. I thought I was done with tricks and done with aerial inverts and all this stuff, but just shows you that, you still can.
I think part of that too, that you touched upon is this acceptance of my body is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where it was before, and accepting that and enjoying that space. And
Totally.
I think that's something that's really important to understand if, someone is recovering from birth or, getting back to pole after a long break, is accepting where your body's at right now and knowing it may not be that way forever. You might be able to
Right.
do all the aerial inversions again, but it's so important to accept and honor your body for where it's at right now. And it might surprise you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think I started teaching again until my younger daughter was over 1. So it wasn't like I jumped into it. She was at least a year old before I started really trying to even do tricks again to that level. But I do think that was the best thing for my mental health. And I would say that to any moms listening, to not try to push yourself at all and to really honor where you're at, whether it's, the way you look and how much abs you can feel or not feel and what you can do and not do. Like, lean into what you can and what feels good mentally and physically, what's most fulfilling. And I think give yourself time and space, and don't try to rush it. And eventually, you'll either get back to where you were or maybe just somewhere new that is fulfilling. And I definitely don't do tricks as much as I did before my kids. I'm definitely a different type of polar now and get more fulfillment from dance. And, you talk about these long combos I do, but like, I'm very strategic in these combos. I'm not like, I'm rarely inverting, I'm holding pretty poses that are not that hard. Like, I know what works for my body and what looks good and what saves energy. And that's what I'm doing. I'm really not trying to do the most, when I'm pulling or doing combos.
Well, it looks like the most to me. I mean, I we have pole jammed before, and we're very different pole
Yeah, yeah,
dancers. And
yeah.
I can't do your poses. My short arms just they won't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I can't do a lot of the stuff you do. So, everyone has some. That's why I tell my students now, because I teach now, like, everyone has different strengths. And that's just whether you have kids or not. The way your body is shaped, how long your limbs are, like, all of these things make such a big difference in pole. And you have to find the things that work best for you and try so hard not to compare yourself to everybody else, because, that's just, you're never going to be that person. You can only be you and your best.
Right. And it's not like we're advocating for people to not do certain moves that, maybe you should do to acquire the strength and the body awareness to do a more advanced move. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if there's a move that doesn't work on your body, you don't have to acquire that move. It's okay to say, I'm at peace
Absolutely.
with not doing that move. And it
Yep.
doesn't take away from your calling card, or what do you call it? It doesn't take away from your ability to call yourself a pole dancer or a good pole dancer.
Absolutely not. Or a teacher or a competitor or whatever you want to perform or whatever you call yourself. And, like, for example, I decided I'm at peace with not doing shoulder mounts. And I really like that about my pole self, because I tried so hard in my early days. Like, there's just certain moves that don't work well for my body. And I can, like, force myself into one and it ain't pretty, but I can get there. And no matter how hard I try, they've never been smooth. They've never been easy for me. I've had plenty of pole people around me who they like them better than regular inverts and whatever. And I've just decided, like, I'm not going to shoulder mount. That's fine with me. That's not a problem. So there's a lot of moves like that where I'm just like, yeah, I'm not really going to do that. And that's okay. It took me years to come to peace with that I don't have to check off every single move to be a good pole dancer, like you're saying. I'll just lean into the moves that, like, I like splits and I'm naturally flexible. So that's lucky for me. And so I do a hell of a lot of splits, and I don't shoulder mount.
I would never know that you couldn't shoulder mount.
Exactly. Right.
I don't miss
Just hide
it.
it.
Yeah,
No, exactly.
I don't look at your videos and go, I haven't seen her shoulder mount in 3 posts. So
Exactly. You haven't seen it in years because I don't do it.
well, you touched on this a little bit before, but you talked a little bit about how you had some back pain with your second one. What was it
Mhm.
like navigating that if you don't mind sharing, what was it like navigating that in the medical world as you were trying to, get back to or start to rebuild where you were at as a pole dancer?
Yeah. Yeah. So the medical world is not very helpful. I had intense back pain through both my pregnancies. I had back labor with both my labors, and then I had intense back pain after both of my kids. And it basically didn't go away between kids. And then after my second, I mean, it's sort of every day. I probably wake up with some level of back pain, and some days it's way worse, and some days it's okay. And it kind of depends how I slept, and who knows what else I still don't fully understand. Um, But yeah, the medical, like my doctors, midwives, no one was able to really tell me much other than like, oh yeah, that happens to some people. That was sort of all they said. And there wasn't any, if I would ask why, why might that be? Because I have a pretty good understanding of the body and things like that. And just trying to understand, they just didn't really care to get into it, I guess, or explain or try to explain. So my best guess is that my pelvis probably shifted from the pregnancies because it actually happened right away, like early pregnancy, first trimester, I had back pain with both of them. So I think it just, yeah, the relaxin or something triggered it. I don't know what, but yeah, I mean, that's been difficult. So the best thing I found was YouTube videos and things to, reduce back pain. And so I just do these daily stretches. I found that side stretching is really helpful in relieving some of the pain. And I think there's something happening with compression for me. And that's why side stretching, I think, opens it up. After my second, when I stretch to the right, my spine clicks like a bunch, like pop, 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 pop. Only when I go that direction. So definitely something happened there, and I don't know what. And to be honest, I haven't been to a PT about that specifically. Like I went for the pelvic floor, but I didn't really address the back pain because the pelvic floor was sort of the more pressing issue, and I probably should have. But I also think part of it, carrying a kid around and breastfeeding and all that stuff, you round forward so much and you're just constantly, and I had two close in age, so I'm carrying both of them sometimes, and you're just constantly rounding forward and having all this forward pressure. I think that definitely made it worse for me. And only recently, my kids are 3 and almost 5. I don't have to carry them quite as much, and I think that's helping a lot. Actually, like actually carrying my kids around was really messing up my back even further. Yeah, that was awful. And that was not something that obviously I anticipated. They couldn't tell me why I had back labor because that's more common when your baby is sunny side up, where, the baby's face is facing up, I think, rather than down. If you have a vaginal birth, and mine weren't that, but I fully had back labor and they were just like, I don't know. And it was very strange. I had it for both, according to them. So I don't know what went on there, but it was awful and something I still deal with.
That's so frustrating. Especially because when you have first given birth and you're having these types of problems, you might go in and advocate for yourself, but let's be real, the focus of your attention right now is keeping the babies alive. And so,
Completely.
yeah, and so
Completely. That's why I didn't go to anyone to help myself. I think I went to a chiropractor once and that was it, and massage like a couple times. But yeah, you have no time to focus on yourself. So yeah, it's just focusing on the baby.
and you're hoping that your healthcare provider or whoever it is, the expert that you're seeing is going to, recognize what's going on and give you answers and give you a pathway to success. But, in the US, Western medicine, if they can't bill for it, if there isn't a specific diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't a monetary incentive to help you. And yes, the first rule of medicine is do no harm, but like, what harm are you really in? You just gave birth to a baby and recovering. It seems normal. And it's really discouraging. I
Yeah,
completely sympathize with you. It's very frustrating to see how hard you have to shout to be heard postpartum.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I have kind of found that in general with musculoskeletal injuries, period, I feel like doctors have little understanding of those types of injuries. Soft tissue injuries, they're just kind of like, ooh, I don't know, go to PT, and it seems like there's a really big knowledge gap and they don't really care so much. And I've had quite a few soft tissue injuries from pole mostly. And after giving birth and things like that. And it just seems like they don't know and they're not even trying that hard to figure it out, and these injuries can take months to heal and be swollen and limit your movement and all this stuff, but it just feels like they don't really care. I don't know.
I think I think there's a lot of PTs out there, and you see like Circ Physio, right? That
Yeah,
specialize in
she's
aerial
great.
arts, yeah, and they have a ton of resources and information that you can go to kind of learn and stuff. But you you would I say you, I want to be able to walk into, like a live person that's close to me that can treat me
Yes,
hands on,
in person.
that,
Totally.
yeah, that
Hmm.
understands that I'm an adult pole hobbyist, and
Yes.
I've I have not been an athlete since I was a child, but I really like pole dancing and it's really, really hard on the body and I want to keep doing it. And the knee-jerk reaction from most medical professionals that are not, specializing in the aerial arts. So your average medical professional that is near you, wherever you happen to live, is going to say, well,
Hmm.
if if it hurts when you do the splits, then don't do the splits anymore.
Right, right, exactly.
And
And I
I,
mean, and you're calling yourself a hobbyist, but you do it for a job as well. It is one of your jobs, right? So it's more than just a hobbyist, but it's still important if you're a hobbyist, but it's also career. And so it's like, well, I can't just not do the splits. I can't just not do the moves. It's part of my life and my work.
Yes, thank you for correcting me. I just full disclosure, I've been feeling a little down on my capabilities as a pole dancer this week. So thank you for
Uh,
propping me up.
that's
That
a whole nother thing we should talk about. Maybe another podcast. Well, I'll take another hour.
yeah,
We all feel that.
yeah, we'll address imposter syndrome another day. Uh,
Yes.
but I think that it is really difficult, and I think it's a situation that comes to light more and more. Like when I was watching, I think Michelle Shimmy did a great job of documenting her postpartum recovery, and she
Hmm.
was seeing a specialist, and they were doing ultrasounds to see how her diastasis recti was coming along and healing.
Oh,
And
if only.
yeah,
If only.
I was like, I want that. How come we don't have
Wouldn't
that
that be
here?
nice? Yeah, yeah. I
When
don't know
I
whether that's just a gap between Australia and the US or whether she found someone great, it could have been that. But yeah, I mean, that would be amazing to have that kind of care.
I'm gonna have to start writing like letters, and because I want to ask her. I want to
Yes.
hear from
Oh,
her.
absolutely. Yeah.
uh, One of the things that really helped me, I think I've been pretty open about how I got injured last year, and it kind of set me on a year-long recovery route. Not that any of
Hmm.
my injuries were that severe. I mean, it was only one that was pretty pressing, and then the rest was like, we're already here, we're already under the hood. Let's see what else we can fix, kind of thing.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right. Right. I
and it
have
was
those.
Yeah. And it was because I had found a PT that knew I was a pole dancer, respected that I was a pole dancer. I he used
That's
to
the key right there.
Yeah, he used to say things like, when you're a high level athlete like you are, and I'm like, if only you
Oh,
knew.
stop.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Respect is the key thing 'cause so many practitioners don't respect it or understand it.
Right. And if you're an average person that goes to pole a couple times a week, like, you're a student or hobbyist, and you
Yeah.
get hurt and you walk into a doctor's office, like, are they, and they tell you to stop pole dancing, like, not that you shouldn't listen to a medical professional, but how discouraging is that here's something that you love, that you like to do, and they're
Mhm.
not giving you an avenue to be able to still do it. And
I mean, not only that you love, but I'm pretty sure most of us pole dancers are, I mean, we're obsessed. It's like we can't, your identity becomes so tied to it that you can't imagine life without it. And that's why injuries and coming back from pregnancy and stuff shakes you up so much because it's like, who am I now if I can't pole? And it's such a scary thought. And yeah, it shakes you to the core.
it really does. I can think back to it. I think it must have been a year ago today, sitting on the floor of my pole room sobbing,
Yeah.
wondering, is this it? I had a 7-year run, and this is it. Am I
Right.
never, and of course everything was fine. According to my PT, the psychology, there is a psychology of injury, and you go through,
Mm.
it's like going through grief or whatever, but not that you,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. No,
Uh,
it is though. I've been through it. I know. It is. There's a feeling of loss because, and the FOMO is so real. You're watching what you should be doing or could be doing, that everyone else is doing, and you can't do it for X amount of time. And maybe you push it and come back too early and hurt yourself more. It's a whole mess.
Yeah, I believe it's denial, sadness, anger, bargaining, and then
Mm-hmm.
acceptance. And during that
Yes.
time, you can completely heal and move on. But
Yes.
the problem I think a lot of us get stuck in pole dancing, because we're all just a smidge psycho, is we get stuck in
Yes.
denial and then we skip straight to bargaining.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I've made that mistake and it has not paid off. So, yeah, I've learned over the years to let the injury heal, and not push it. But in the early days, I would just try and push through. And that is not a good strategy.
And you can't do that as a mother when you have obligations to your family.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And nor do I even have the time to push through my injuries anymore. I have such little time to pull. That's not happening anymore. But yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in today, my friends, to listen to part 1 of my episode with Allie. Please stay tuned and hit that subscribe button. We will be coming back at you with the second half of our chat. There is plenty more to come. So stay tuned, my friends. Check out the show notes below if you would like to support us. This podcast is fueled by copious amounts of afternoon coffee and a passion for supporting women throughout their movement journeys. So if you can support us in any way to help us keep this space alive, please consider doing so at the link below in the show notes. In the meantime, my friends, keep on dancing, and remember, there's enough spotlight for all of us to shine.